We're going to talk about risk committee, audit committee, board owns it as a whole, pros and cons. John, you get to start.
Risk is a critical issue. The board needs to own it and really own it, in my view. And it's much different to me to sit through an hour or an hour and a half on risk as compared to just having a 10-minute summary of what the risk committee did. That having been said, at the risk of sounding a bit wishy-washy, if there really is a lot of granular work to do, if perhaps there's not a good risk process set up, if perhaps there are 3 risks where a lot of follow-up is required, I can see there being need for a risk committee. In generally, I think the board should own risk by itself.
I would agree with that. One thing I will say, though, a practical tip, if you do split it up and put it into a committee, as you must if you are a financial institution in the United States, I think it's critical that there be overlap with the committee members. So if you have a risk committee, there should be at least one member who also sits on the audit committee. So I think having that overlap, if you want to put risk in a committee, gives you a better sense of that holistic approach, which is really what's important, is that the whole board has a sense of ownership and understands what's going on so that it's not siloed and the board can't say, oh, well, that's over in risk or that's over in the audit committee.
Well, Cindy, I have to admit, I'm a little surprised. You, of all people, the one that says there has to be a champion of things. If you go to the whole board committee, and I don't care how much time you take with that, if you look at the chairs of the other committees, audit, comp, nom-gov, they are spending hours organizationally, information-wise, in between. There has to be an owner. There has to be a champion.
I agree totally with that. So if it's, let's say it's in the whole board, you still have a board member who's going to be the champion. Or it could be the head of internal audit that's the champion. But somebody who has his or her finger on the pulse of the risk that has been identified by the board. And to John's point earlier, what's the company's risk appetite? So having the champion understand that and having responsibility to communicate, so that way in between board meetings when you're having these 90-minute deep dives, there is somebody who's on point and everybody knows who that person is.
Well,
See, to me,
1 second, then I want to get to you, because that to me is very informal, okay? The best risk committees that I've seen, and I'm going to want your thoughts on this, John, best risk committees I've seen has somebody from comp because of the comp risk. So the chair of comp, the chair of the audit committee, the risk committee, and then somebody from the nom-gov, so that the communications to each working committee is very effective. And then somebody has a responsibility formally from meeting to meeting to have responsibility for risk, and particularly for those black swan events, okay? Because I'm an advocate about the strategic planning process. But talk about that type of concept with the communications. And John, somebody being the champion that's more than just a casual champion.
Well, I don't necessarily think that a board of 7 to 9 people has 7 to 9 casual people. So I really do think that a board can oversee risk and do so thoughtfully. If there's one specific risk that's just frightening, perhaps there should be a frightening risk committee, if you will. I don't think drawing up the perfect play means it gets executed perfectly. And so I don't disagree with a person from comp, a person from audit, a separate risk committee on a piece of paper. A risk committee is not a panacea. And I think, again, if there's a lot of incremental work to be done away from the typical board calendar because your risk process isn't well established, because you've got one enormous risk, set up a risk committee or set up a committee on a specific risk. But there's no reason, in my view, that a board can't oversee risk itself in this group of typically 7 to 9 people, just like it oversees planning, major acquisitions, et cetera.